Before soap was a bar on a bathroom sink, it was ash, it was oil, it was a ritual. Imagine this: a riverbank at dawn, mist curling through reeds. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, sweat, wet earth. Hands dipped in water, skin stained from clay and labor, and beside a woven basket, a small, bubbling pot of something strange. Animal fat and plant ash simmering. No one calls it soap, not yet, but someone is absolutely making it. And through this mixture, greasy, gritty, imperfect, they are doing something revolutionary. They are choosing to be clean. Not just to smell better, not just to feel better, but to survive. This is the story of soap.
Codex Entry retrieved.
Before formulas were written in clay, before bar soaps lined marble baths, there were rivers and hands, and the weight of the day clinging to the skin like dust and memory. Long before the word clean meant hygiene, it meant wholeness. To wash was not just to remove dirt, it was to reset. To be seen again by the gods, the tribe, or yourself. In those earliest days, humans bathed not with soap, but with what the earth gave freely. Water, always flowing, always purifying. Sand, rough in texture, gentle in result. Really, nature's first exfoliant. Clay, absorbing the oils of labor, pulling impurities from skin. And ash, the powdery remains of fire, cutting grease, stripping grime, purifying without scent or softness. In ancient Egypt, the Nile was not just a river, it was considered a god. Its waters carried both life and rebirth. Priests would often bathe multiple times per day, not for vanity, but for ritual purity. The line between bathing and prayer was absolutely thin. In Mesopotamia, woven reeds became tools. The act of scrubbing became a form of devotion. Cleaning, not just the body, but the residue of toil. In the Indus Valley, cities like Mohenjo-Daro reveal drainage systems more advanced than much later civilizations even. Entire public bathing platforms were built, suggesting that even 4,000 years ago, cleanliness was not just a habit. It was a shared value, a cornerstone of culture. And though they had no bars of soap, the instinct was there to rinse, to scrub, to shed the day, to feel new again. The history of soap did not just begin in bathrooms or apothecaries. It began in nature, in mud and riverbeds. Even without knowing science, early humans knew the feeling. A splash of cold water on a hot day. The comfort of rinsing sweat from the brow. The quiet moment after scrubbing away the smell of fear, of hunger, of work. They knew. Clean skin meant a second chance, a rebirth, a return to self. And I can't imagine what it would be like to go without a shower for, I don't know how long people went without showers back then, but, I think 3 days would be my limit. Maybe even 2. Let alone, weeks or months that prehistoric people, went through between bathing. I bet that first, wherever they bathed, the river or maybe like a waterfall, must have felt like coming back to life. Like waking up inside your own skin again. And I really think we take soap for granted. But for them, even cold water in the morning sun was an absolute blessing. But how did soap really begin? Not in temples, not in sparkling bathhouses or something along the lines of that, but something much more humble, more primal. Rain fell, and as it always has, it found its way through the landscape, washing down hillsides, slipping through campfires burned out long ago, filtering through ashes. Ash, rich in minerals like potassium carbonate, was no ordinary dust. When mixed with water, something subtle happened. It made a slippery solution what we now call lye. Now, picture this. On the edge of a cook fire, an animal carcass is being rendered for fat, not for soap, for fuel, for waterproofing skins, for light in the dark. And then, whether by accident, a spill, or right now it's storming outside pretty bad, maybe a storm, or maybe by curiosity, fat met lye. And suddenly, the greasy substance clinging to the pot started to bubble. Not in the way broth boils, but in a way that clung to the hands when rinsed, that stripped away soot and grime, that cut through filth. Maybe even cutting through the fishy finger smell on 51st dates. And in that moment, whether they realized it or not, soap was born. And this was not a luxury item. No scented bar wrapped in paper. It was rough, caustic, sometimes painful to the skin, but it worked. Ash cuts grease. Fat traps dirt. And together, they performed alchemy. Turning refuse into renewal. And the earliest people to harness this practice were not perfumers or beauticians, but they were hunters, tanners, mothers boiling bones, people whose lives depended on clean tools, clean hands, clean wounds. And what makes this truly incredible is they didn't know the chemistry of it. But they understood the outcome. This is early science born from observation, not calculation. From repeating what seemed to work until it worked better. Some anthropologists believe this first form of soap may have appeared on stone cooking surfaces where the runoff would come from boiling meat, mingling with the wood ash, hardened into something waxy. Maybe someone touched it, rinsed their hand, and felt something different. It's not hard to imagine someone kneeling by a river, rubbing that strange residue between their fingers, watching the dirt slide away. Not just washed, lifted. And maybe, for the first time, they saw the body beneath the labor. The face beneath the fire smoke. This is more than hygiene. It's survival chemistry. It's chemistry without goggles or glass beakers, but with fire, bone, fat, and ash. It's civilization before civilization knew its name. Soap wasn't something you made for beauty. It was something you kept for function. A rough paste that let you clean a blade, scrub your hands, or dress a wound without rot setting in. From ash and animal came cleanliness. From waste came a fool to fight decay. And every time that mixture was stirred again, every time another pot boiled over ash and fat, humanity took one more step towards something larger. Not just cleanliness, but control. Imagine this: a slab of clay, sun-dried and etched with symbols. Not a poem, not a law, but a recipe. From somewhere around 2800 BCE. In the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, what we now call Iraq, archaeologists uncovered a cuneiform tablet, and it didn't speak of kings or gods. It spoke of something more humble: water, alkali, oil. Specifically, cassia oil, a fragrant extract somewhat like cinnamon. Together, these three ingredients formed one of earliest in history, or written records in history, of soap making. But here's the part that catches most people off guard. They weren't bathing with it. They were washing wool. In a time where cloth was precious, spun by hand, dyed with rare pigments, stitched with care, what we wore said something about who we were. Wool from sheep, dyed fabrics from plant-based inks, garments that carried warmth, identity, and status. And all of it needed care. Soap, then, wasn't about the body. It was about the fiber that wrapped it. About preserving value. About preparing something to last. This reminds us that cleanliness at first was not about vanity. It was about preservation. It was about ritual. And it was about respect. A stain on your tunic wasn't just dirt. It was dishonor. It fouled wool that couldn't be spun again. Soap was how you protected those things that couldn't be easily replaced. And that really tells us something profound. Before soap touched skin, it touched the tools of civilization. The loom, the spindle, the dye vat. Before the bath came the basin. Before hygiene came craftsmanship. And the Babylonians, brilliant engineers of canals, had already mastered the kind of chemistry needed to extract alkali from ash, mix it with water, and blend it with oils into something usable. It may not have lathered like our modern soaps, and it may not have smelled like lavender or citrus, but it did something more important. It protected what mattered. In many ways, Babylonian soap wasn't just an invention, it was a memory tool. Something that kept the work of many hands intact for another day. And to write that down on a clay tablet was to say, this right here is worth remembering. That moment when someone carved the first formula into stone, that was the beginning of something far larger than they could imagine. A lineage, a legacy, a lather that would echo across millennia. So picture this. The sun rises over the Nile, spilling gold across limestone temples. Incense curls in the air. A priest steps into the water, not once, but 5 times per day. The ancient Egyptians, cleansing wasn't just a habit, it was holiness. They didn't call it soap like we do, but they understood the power of purification. Their recipe? A mix of animal fat, alkaline salts like natron or natrone, not sure how you pronounce that, might be, I think natrone, we'll just go with that for now, and fragrant oils, blended into paste, salves, and south soapy balms used by both nobility and commoners. Cleanliness touched every corner of Egyptian life. Priests purifying themselves before rituals, mourners preparing the dead for the afterlife, mothers washing infants in scented waters. To be clean was to be prepared. To enter a temple, to stand before gods, to journey beyond death. Even tombs show traces of this reverence. Cleansing products were buried with the dead, next to jewels, bread, shebtis, suggesting that the afterlife, cleanliness would matter. Because in Egypt, to be clean was to be seen by the divine, by your ancestors, by eternity itself. Now, in Rome, if you could imagine, the scent of warm stone and olive oil fills the air. Footsteps echo across mosaics. Steam rises, and bodies glisten under vaulted ceilings. The Romans didn't just bathe, they gathered. Bathhouses were sprawling hubs of society, complete with heated floors, steam chambers, cold plunges, and libraries or even gyms nearby. But here's the twist. Soap wasn't the main character. Soap wasn't the star. They rubbed themselves with olive oil, then scraped off the grime by using strigils, a crescent-shaped metal tool. Dirt, sweat, and dead skin came off in ribbons. A cleansing not just of the body, but the burdens of the day. For Romans, cleanliness wasn't solitary. It was a performance, a shared rhythm of grit and grace, of flesh and fire. Even politics and philosophy bathed. Senators sat beside stonemasons. Whispers drifted between hot stones. But by the 1st century CE, a shift was stirring. In Gaul, which is now modern-day France, people began making true soap using tallow and ashes. It was traded through the empire, and it was practical, but it was also rare at the same time. And still, olive oil dominated Rome's hygiene rituals. Soap in Rome was less about the act of bathing and more about evolution. A whisper of something new. A substance that didn't scrape or steamed, but foamed. A Roman bath wasn't a bathroom. It was a sanctuary. A place where dirt met dignity, and where soap, just beginning to find its way, waited in the wings. Imagine walking through a market in Aleppo. Spices hang like garlands from rafters. Cedar wood and frankincense ride in the wind. And in one stall, blocks of soap, earthy, golden, fragrant, are stacked like treasure. This wasn't just soap, it was alchemy. Refined, intentional, exquisite. The Islamic world didn't just preserve the knowledge of soap from earlier civilizations, they perfected it. During the 8th and 13th centuries, the Islamic Golden Age saw the rise of scientific thinking, medicine, and chemistry. And soap was at the center of all of it. Scholars like Al-Razi meticulously documented recipes. They described methods to make solid, perfumed soap using vegetable oils like olive oil or laurel, lye, and natural colorants. Not just function, but form and fragrance. Soap wasn't just about survival. It became a craft, a status symbol, and sometimes even a gift of diplomacy. Cities like Nablus, Aleppo, and Fez grew famous for their unique soap varieties. Aleppo's soap was somewhat green, it was hard, aged like cheese, and it was made of laurel oil. The Nablus soap was pure white, creamy, and it was used all across the Mediterranean. Markets weren't just scented, they were alive. Lather became luxury. Bars were stamped with the marks of their origin. Soap makers passed down formulas like family secrets. And beyond the soap itself, there was intention. Islamic hygiene rituals like wudu, the act of washing before prayer, meant cleanliness was absolutely sacred, not optional. So, soap wasn't indulgence, it was a bridge between body and spirit. This era didn't just leave behind cleaner hands, it left behind an ethic of care, of science infused with spirit, of cleansing, as both a ritual and an art. And a little unknown fact I came across: during the time when the plague was sweeping across Europe, a lot of people thought Islamic communities were protected by some kind of magic or divine favor. But really, it wasn't magic at all. It was simply hygiene. Daily ritual of washing, wudu, was done 5 times a day as part of religious practice and meant they were naturally cleaner, more regularly disinfected, and more aware of bodily care. While others saw mystery, the truth was in the routine. And that kind of discipline, it didn't just clean the skin, it protected entire cities. It makes me wonder how many miracles in history were just simply good habits, quietly repeated. And when Rome fell, so too did its vision of public cleanliness. The great bathhouses emptied, the communal rituals of hygiene disappeared, and in their place, fear, plague, and layers of linen. Water itself became suspect. Many believed it opened the pores to illness. Soap, a harsh commodity, often used to scrub clothes, not skin. The common people bathed rarely, if at all. Lye soap was brutal. It stripped not just dirt, but comfort as well. Only the monasteries preserved the knowledge. Behind stone walls, monks made rudimentary soap for utility, not luxury. Fat, ash, function. But outside, in the growing medieval towns, the scent of the body was accepted, even expected. Cleanliness was no longer sacred, it was forgotten. Then, a shift. Cities grew. Trade routes opened. Plagues returned. And with them, questions. By the 1500s, hygiene reemerged not as survival but as status. Rose-scented soaps from Florence, lavender, lather in the courts of France. In Spain, olive oil became gold, pressed into Castile soaps, white, soft, pure. And Marseille rose to prominence. Probably butchered that as well. Oh well. Its factories steaming with fragrant batches. Clean skin was a signal of class, of care. But soap still bore a price. In the 18th century, Britain, it was taxed heavily. Soap was for the rich. But whispers grew louder. Science was catching up. Clean wasn't just elegant, it was essential. And today, when you hold a modern soap bar in your hand, do you think of it as ancient technology? Something born not just from chemistry, but from centuries of trial, myth, ritual? And then revelation. In the 1800s, the invisible world was discovered. Germs, tiny enemies hiding in plain touch. A Hungarian doctor watched mothers die in hospitals. His answer: wash your hands. Joseph Lister followed: antiseptics, sterilization, scrubbing the unseen. Hospitals changed. Surgery changed. Life was saved. Soap became more than a product. It became a weapon. Governments built newer systems. Public campaigns encouraged washing. Soap was no longer a luxury item. It was a matter of life and death. Cleanliness became virtue, a moral duty, a scientific necessity. And suddenly, humanity remembered what early rivers once taught us. To be clean is to live. To cleanse is to care. To lather is to protect. Today, soap is everywhere. In foaming pumps, in liquid bottles, in commercials promising lavender dreams or ocean breeze awakenings. But beneath the branding, it's still the same. Fat, lye, water, time. To wash your hands is to echo history. To bathe is to return to the riverbank. Soap didn't just change how we smell. It changed how we live, how we treat ourselves, how we care for others. It began as accident. Ash and fat, rain and fire. A bubbling reaction in some ancient clay pot. And suddenly, we had a way to lift the world's weight off of our skin. But soap is more than lather. It's survival. It's science. It's sacred. A bar of soap may seem small, but behind it are rivers and rituals, monks and markets, battles and breakthroughs. Each wash echoes every time a Babylonian dyed wool, every time an Egyptian priest cleansed before prayer, every time a mother, a healer, a stranger reached for water and said, "Let's begin again." Soap connects ash to oil, clay to cassia. It ties the sacred to the simple, and chemistry to culture. In its foam, we found something ancient. Not just the removal of dirt, but the return of dignity. To wash is to reclaim ourselves, to rinse away what no longer serves, to rise again, body, mind, and spirit. And maybe That's the greatest lesson. That even in our dirtiest moments, after war, after disease, after despair, we can start clean again. We can choose to reset, to soften, to care. All it takes is water, a bar of soap, and a moment of intention.
Codex Entry complete.